We're bringing in consultants with fresh viewpoints, Julian said as he slid termination documents across the polished mahogany table. Your legacy systems are holding us back. My name is Caleb Mercer. I'm 47 years old, and up until that moment, I was the senior systems architect at Iron Veil Technologies, a position I held for 18 years. I had developed their foundational software platform from scratch, powered solely by caffeine and code, back when we were just 6 people working out of a warehouse in Seattle. I gave a silent nod and took the packet. I didn't object or beg. I simply said, "I understand," and started packing my things as HR observed quietly. The new CEO had been with the company for just 3 months, a young guy, not even 40. He'd been brought in by the private equity firm that took over last year. He wore tailored suits and liked to talk about streamlining operations and modernizing the vision. Not once did he ask how the system truly functioned. That morning, I'd watched him swagger into the office with 2 consultants from a trendy firm in San Francisco. It wasn't hard to figure out what was about to happen. 18 years. I had turned down higher-paying offers, missed my son's baseball games, and spent countless nights fixing server issues while the rest of the world slept. I did it because I believed in what we were building. They gave me 30 minutes to clear my office. I used 15. On my way out, I passed Donna from accounting. She'd been with me since the early days. Her eyes widened when she saw the box in my hands. "Caleb, what's going on?" "Time for fresh perspectives," I said softly. The security guard escorted me out. Tyler, a good kid whose dad and I fish with on weekends. He looked down. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Mercer. Not your fault." I drove home in silence. No radio, no calls, just the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers slicing through the Seattle rain. Karen, my wife, wasn't home yet. I set the box on the kitchen counter and pulled out a few things: my coffee mug, family photos, a small external hard drive. Nothing that belonged to the company. Then I brewed a pot of coffee and opened my personal laptop. Inside one of my old folders was documentation proving that I'd written the core algorithm powering Iron Veil's entire platform, on my own time, using my own hardware. The timestamps and copyright registration dated back 6 months before I was even hired. I had licensed it to the company permanently, but clearly no one in the new management had ever bothered to look into that. I sipped my coffee, knowing I wouldn't have to wait long. One of the systems would break down within days. I first met Harold Voss in 2004 at a programming conference in Portland. We connected instantly over our shared frustration with existing inventory systems. He had just launched Iron Veil with his brother-in-law and a small team of developers. Their product had promise, but scalability was a problem. Over beers, I sketched out an algorithm that could eliminate their database bottleneck. He hired me on the spot. For the first 5 years, we worked 80-hour weeks. I missed my daughter Olivia's first steps while debugging a server crash. Karen almost left me, twice. "You're married to that company," she'd say. She wasn't wrong. When Harold had a heart attack in 2011, I stepped up, not as CEO, I never wanted that, but as the technical foundation that kept the company afloat. While others panicked, I kept systems running. When investors showed interest, I presented our growth figures. When rival firms tried to lure our talent, I convinced key engineers to stay. Harold sold the company in 2019. He said he was tired and wanted time with his grandkids. I understood, but I also felt the first crack forming. The new owners were all about quarterly performance and profit margins. Then came the pandemic. Our system kept going while competitors crashed. Hospitals, supply chains, government agencies, they all relied on us. I worked 20-hour days to make sure nothing failed. The board thanked me with a plaque and a bonus. Nice gestures. Last year, we were acquired again, this time by a private equity group. That's when they installed Julian Keene as CEO. 2 weeks into the job, he canceled our annual development retreat. "Unnecessary expense," he said, though it cost less than his signing bonus. 3 weeks in, he reorganized the engineering team without consulting me and brought in his Stanford buddies as consultants. A month ago, during a management meeting, he called me old school and said we needed a total rethink of our strategy. I saw it coming. Still, I kept my head down and made sure everything kept running. Karen noticed something was off. "They're pushing you out, aren't they?" she asked one evening. Maybe. What are you going to do? I just shrugged. That weekend, I updated my files, double-checked my copyright registration, and made sure my personal code repositories were well organized. Not to cause problems, just to be ready. There was one thing I never told anyone. The original algorithm, the mathematical engine behind everything Iron Veil sold, was never actually transferred to the company. I'd only licensed it. And there's a big difference. 3 days after I was let go, I was out back fixing the fence when my phone buzzed. 5 missed calls from Iron Veil's main line. 2 more from Julian's direct number. 1 voicemail. Caleb, this is Julian. We're having issues with the core systems. We need your expertise. Please call me back ASAP. I put the phone back in my pocket and kept hammering. An hour later, more missed calls. Texts from former colleagues. Systems were failing. No one knew what to do. The consultants had broken something inside the core algorithm. Clients were threatening to walk. I finished the fence, took a shower, and made dinner for Karen and the kids. We watched a movie together. I turned my phone off. The following morning, I found an email from Julian flagged as urgent. Consulting opportunity. He was offering me $300 per hour to assist with some transition problems. No reference to what had occurred just 3 days earlier. I responded courteously, declining the offer. By noon, their legal department reached out, citing concerns about proprietary software and employee responsibilities. I passed the message along to my attorney without a word. An hour later, my lawyer called, laughing. They obviously haven't reviewed your original agreements, he said. The copyright on that algorithm is officially registered to you. You gave them a license, and it explicitly prohibits any alterations without written approval. You're totally protected. That's when the full reality set in. 18 years. All those sacrifices. The missed birthdays, the school recitals, the sleepless nights. And in the end, they tossed me aside like obsolete tech. I walked into my home office and opened the desk drawer where I'd kept a business card for nearly a year. Elaine Winters, CTO of Meridian Systems. She had approached me at a conference last spring, clearly impressed by what we'd achieved at Iron Veil. If you ever want to change, she'd said, we'd build something meaningful around you. Back then, I was still loyal. Now, I was unbound. I didn't call Elaine right away. Instead, I drove out to Lake Washington and sat quietly, watching boats glide across the water. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't tangled in deployment logs or server uptimes. My phone rang again. Caleb, we need to talk, Julian said. The situation is urgent. I'm listening. Our clients are threatening to pull out. The consultants can't decipher your system's framework. We need you to return. As what? A pause. As a senior consultant, with proper compensation, of course. And the outdated legacy systems? Another pause. Perhaps we were premature in our judgment. I watched as a blue heron landed gracefully on a dock nearby. I'll consider it, I said, though I already knew I wouldn't. Not on those terms. Not at all. On the way home, my thoughts were calm, but steady. The realization wasn't just that they needed me. It was that I didn't need them. 2 days later, I accepted Elaine's invitation to lunch. We met at a quiet restaurant in Bellevue, far from Seattle's tech core. I heard what's happening at Iron Veil, she said after we ordered. Their infrastructure has been unstable for nearly a week. I gave a small nod, but remained silent. Their clients are getting uneasy, especially in the healthcare sector. I took a sip of water. They've got competent developers, I said, but not the architect. Elaine studied me. You built something incredible, Caleb. Something that shouldn't collapse due to executive short-sightedness. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a formal job offer, Chief Innovation Officer. Double my former salary, equity in the company, and the ability to build my own team. We want to create the future version of what you started, she said, but this time with you truly valued. I told her I needed to think it over, wanted to talk it through with Karen first. When I arrived home, a black sedan was parked outside. 2 men in expensive suits were waiting on my front porch. Iron Veil's attorneys. Mr. Mercer, the older one, began, we've been trying to reach you about a critical company issue. I no longer work for the company. This involves intellectual property created during your employment. We'll need to collect all personal devices for examination. It's standard in these situations. I knew what they were fishing for, evidence that I had used company tools to create my algorithm or incorporated proprietary code into it. Anything they could use to void the license. "You'll need to speak with my lawyer," I said, handing them his card. "I have nothing further to say." That night, Julian called again. "Your lawyer's being uncooperative," he said. "This could get complicated, Caleb. Legal disputes, media fallout. None of us want that." "What do you want, Julian?" "Come back. 6 months, full salary. Help the transition team grasp the architecture. When it's done, you walk away clean. The company retains full rights to the software, and you get closure." "The core algorithm was never Ironvale's property," I said. "I licensed it to the company before I was even hired." Silence. "That's ridiculous. Anything you built while employed was work for hire. Refer to the licensing agreement from 2004. It's still enforceable. That document doesn't exist. We've reviewed everything." Harold kept a copy. So did I, and the Copyright Office still holds one. Longer silence this time. "We'll need to confirm that," he finally said, tight-lipped. "Take all the time you need." The next day, Ironvale cut off access to all my former engineers while the consultants attempted to rebuild the system from scratch. By that evening, 3 major client servers had crashed. Karen found me in the garage, neatly arranging tools I hadn't used in years. "They're falling apart, aren't they?" she asked. I gave a nod. "Does that make you feel good?" I laid the wrench down slowly. "No, there are good people still working there. They don't deserve this." "Neither did you," she said gently. The next morning, Ironvale's stock plunged 20% after news of the system failures went public. I started receiving messages from my old colleagues. "What happened? Did you sabotage something?" I replied to each one the same way. "I didn't touch a thing. They altered a licensed module without authorization." By that afternoon, Julian had gone from threatening to pleading. He offered a generous consulting deal and even a public apology. I didn't respond. Later that evening, one of the consultants found the licensing agreement in Harold's archived records. Within an hour, Ironvale's legal team contacted my attorney with an entirely different tone. The trap they had set had backfired. Exactly 1 week after I was let go, I had lunch with Harold. He'd been retired for 3 years, but still kept an eye on the company he once built. "They really blew it," he said, shaking his head. "Trying to reconstruct your algorithm from the ground up." "Idiots," I muttered. We were sitting at his favorite diner in Tacoma, away from anyone who might recognize us. "Did you foresee this happening?" I asked. Harold stirred his coffee. "I knew they didn't understand what they were buying. These private equity guys never do. They focus on numbers, not architecture." He pulled a battered folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "Remember this?" Inside was our original partnership agreement from 2004. Not the company employment contract, but the personal agreement between Harold and me. It clearly stated that the algorithm remained my intellectual property, with Ironvale receiving an exclusive, perpetual license, contingent on my ongoing employment or mutual separation agreement. "You protected me back then," I said. Harold nodded. "You were taking a risk joining a startup. I wanted you to maintain ownership of your creation in case things went south." "Did you tell the new owners?" "I tried. I mentioned it during due diligence, but they weren't interested in technicalities from the past." He made air quotes with his fingers. "They just wanted the assets and the client list." That's when the full picture became clear. Julian hadn't just fired me impulsively. No, the private equity firm was planning to dismantle Ironvale, sell off the client relationships and proprietary technology for the highest return possible. They needed me gone because I was the only one who fully understood how everything fit together. My termination wasn't about bringing in fresh ideas. It was about making their asset stripping process easier. "There's more," Harold said softly. Before I left, I added a clause to the sale agreement. If the core technology becomes non-functional for more than 10 consecutive days, I have the right to buy back the company at a predetermined price. I stared at him. Why would they agree to that? They didn't read the fine print. Too focused on closing the deal, Harold smiled. I also told them it would protect their investment if the tech failed. "So you can buy it back?" I asked. We can buy it back, he corrected. I've got some funds set aside, and a few of the original investors are on board. But we'll need you. The pieces began shifting in my mind, not out of spite, but for something more precise. A correction. That evening, I received an email from an anonymous account. Inside was evidence that Julian and the consultants had been plotting to sell our healthcare division to a competitor, an action that would have violated client confidentiality agreements and possibly exposed sensitive patient data. One of my former colleagues was clearly leaking information. I forwarded it to my lawyer. The next day, 3 major clients announced they were suspending their contracts with Iron Veil due to ongoing reliability issues. Their combined revenue accounted for 40% of the company's annual income. By the weekend, the board called an emergency meeting, and Julian was placed on administrative leave. On day 9 of the system failures, Iron Veil's general counsel reached out with a settlement proposal, a 7-figure payment in exchange for the immediate reinstatement of the license. I didn't reply. That evening, Karen and I sat on the back deck, watching the sunset. Harold wants to buy the company back, I told her. With you? With me? She asked. I squeezed her hand. Do you want that? I thought about the 18 years, late nights, the code, the missed family moments. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Tomorrow will be day 10. Day 10 arrived with Iron Veil systems still offline. Financial analysts were predicting bankruptcy if the situation didn't improve. Former colleagues reported that the office was half empty, either from layoffs or resignations. I met with Harold and my attorney at a private office downtown. Elaine from Meridian joined us via video call. The board is desperate, my lawyer explained. They've offered $3 million for a permanent license transfer. And if we wait? I asked. Harold's buyback clause activates at midnight. The predetermined price is $8 million for the entire company. Harold leaned forward. I've secured $4 million in backing. The other 4 will need to come from new partners. All eyes turned to Elaine on the screen. Meridian is prepared to partner, she said. $4 million for a 40% stake, contingent on Caleb joining as CTO with appropriate equity. I hadn't expected this turn of events. I thought you wanted me at Meridian. This is better, Elaine replied. You'd be rebuilding something meaningful to you with the right team and support. Our companies could also explore joint ventures that benefit both of us. My mind raced through the possibilities. Taking back Iron Veil meant saving jobs, protecting decades of built client relationships, and continuing the work I believed in. There's one more thing, I said. The current employees, many of them stayed loyal despite everything. They deserve protection. Agreed, Harold said. No layoffs for at least 6 months and an employee ownership program. I nodded. Then I'm in. We spent the rest of the day preparing documents. My lawyer drafted the license transfer agreement with specific conditions. Harold contacted board members who'd worked with him before, explaining the situation. Elaine prepared the partnership terms. At 5 p.m., we submitted formal notice of Harold's intent to exercise his buyback option. At 6 p.m., Julian called, panic clear in his voice. Caleb, whatever they're offering, we'll double it. Just fix the systems today. It's not about money, I said. Then what? A public apology. Your old job back. Name it. It's about building something that lasts. Something that matters. This is business, not some idealistic dream. I hung up. By 8 p.m., Julian had been officially dismissed by the board. They contacted me directly, desperate to avoid the buyback. We've made mistakes, the chairman admitted, but we can still make this right. You're right, I replied. By honoring Harold's buyback clause and facilitating an orderly transition. At 11:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the deadline, they gave in. The board approved Harold's buyback, and Meridian's partnership was accepted. The paperwork was signed at midnight. I sat at my kitchen table. I quickly wrote a simple email to my former team. The algorithm will be reinstated tomorrow morning. Iron Veil is now under new ownership. No jobs will be lost. I'll explain everything at the all-hands meeting. Caleb, Karen sat beside me as I hit send. So, you going back? She asked. Not back, forward, I replied, closing my laptop. Different company now, different terms. You'll be busier than ever for a while, I admitted. But this time, I won't miss the important stuff. She smiled, skeptical but supportive. The next morning, I drove to the office for the first time since my termination. People stared as I walked through the lobby. Some looked confused, others relieved. Donna from accounting hugged me in the elevator. "What happened?" she whispered. "Long story," I said. "But the short version? Sometimes you have to let something break in order to fix it properly." The conference room was packed for the all-hands meeting. Harold stood at the front, looking energized despite his age. Elaine joined via video call. I took my place beside them, feeling the weight of what we were about to rebuild. It wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration. 6 months after regaining control of Iron Veil, we held a product launch at the Seattle Convention Center. The room was filled with clients, industry analysts, and the media. Harold opened with the company's history and vision. Elaine spoke about our partnership with Meridian. Then it was my turn. I stepped to the podium, aware that Julian was sitting in the back row. He'd landed at a competitor and was clearly there to gather intelligence. "Today, we're unveiling Integrasphere," I said, "a completely reimagined system architecture that builds on our core strengths while embracing new possibilities." The screens behind me displayed the interface, streamlined, powerful, elegant. What makes this system unique isn't just the technology, it's the people behind it. Our team, many of whom have been with us for over a decade, built this together. I nodded toward the front row, where my development team Saturday. "We've restructured our company, so they now have an ownership stake. Their commitment deserves nothing less." The audience applauded. I noticed Julian shifting uncomfortably. "We've also established the Iron Veil Foundation," I continued, "which will open source select components of our technology for use in education and public service." More applause. Finally, I'm pleased to announce that every client affected by last year's system failure will receive 2 years of service at no charge, along with migration support to our new platform. The room erupted. It was a bold move financially, but Harold, Elaine, and I had agreed that rebuilding trust was worth the cost. As we opened the floor for questions, Julian slipped out the back door. He'd come expecting to see a company limping back from disaster, but instead, he witnessed one transformed by it. His new employer's stock dropped 8% by closing bell. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't striking back, it's rising higher. 1 year after the buyback, I drove to Lake Washington on a clear Saturday morning. No laptop, no phone, just a fishing rod and a small cooler. Harold was waiting in his boat, silver hair beneath his worn baseball cap. "Right on time," he said as I climbed aboard. We navigated to his favorite spot and cast our lines in comfortable silence. "Bart approved the employee ownership expansion," he mentioned after a while. "Another 5% allocated." "Good," I said, watching my line. "They've earned it." We caught nothing for an hour, just talk about our families, baseball, anything but work. Eventually, Harold asked, "Do you ever think about how it all played out?" I considered the question. The past 18 months had been the most challenging and rewarding of my career, taking back the company, rebuilding the systems and culture, finding balance between work and home. I think about the algorithm sometimes, I admitted, how something I created alone in my apartment became the foundation for everything. "Regrets?" Harold asked. I shook my head. I could have left for another job, started my own company, but I stayed because I believe in what we were building together. And now I know the difference between loyalty and ownership, between building something and belonging to it. My line suddenly went tight. I stood carefully, reeling in a decent-sized base. After we got in the boat, Harold laughed. "Still got the touch." Later, as we headed back to shore, I noticed the Iron Veil building visible in the distance, its logo catching the sunlight. It wasn't the same company anymore, better in some ways, still finding its way in others. But it was ours. Not just mine, not just Harold's or Elaine's. Everyone who built it, piece by piece. Some things you can't own alone. Some things you shouldn't.